Welcome back to Rhythm Method Air. Libertas Part II. Hashtag this is virtue. Let's get back to it. There was effectively no immigration in the United States for 4 decades, until 1830, and then tens of thousands of Brits, Germans, and Irish began showing up. Except for Ireland, who was also sending women. And, there's a lot to think about in terms of like what's going on now regarding the forever alone people, the MGTOWs, the incels, the male to female ratio, and strategies, reproductive strategies. It's just something that I just thought of just now while saying that. So, but anyway, that's probably an issue for another time. Migrants were male, generally aged 18 to 25 years old. It seems pretty obvious, and for obvious reasons. Immigration tripled by 1850. In 1875, the Asian Exclusion Act was passed. I guess the railroads were built and the trains were running by then, and they no longer had any use for the Chinese. You see a pattern here? Racism and white people, ethno-state shit. The rich white people could pay brown and yellow people less, or nothing, to do all the work, which really kind of pissed off the bottom tier white people that found themselves in the same position they were in that caused them to migrate in the first place. And that's a basic tenet of conservatism. What do I mean? Okay, look. Empires require slave labor. It's at the root of the immigration and abortion issue. Slave labor is by definition forced labor, so they want to force immigrant labor from entering the country through borders, and they want to force labor into the country through the uteruses of poor people, poor women. You see how those dots connect? Poor people are the most likely people to have abortions because the main reason women have abortions is because they can't afford to raise a child. It's always financial. Now, rich people don't have unwanted pregnancies, and when they do, like Arnold Schwarzenegger and his Guatemalan maid, maybe she's from Honduras, I don't know. The point is, he can afford to provide for the child should he decide to not be a brazen hypocrite and allow for his mistress to have an abortion or to financially support an unwanted kid. Ultimately, it's up to him. Now, there's nothing patriarchal about that now, is there? The hypocrisy knows no bounds. Here's how you know they're full of shit. Say Obama was conceived in Hawaii, but born in Kenya. Say Obama was conceived in Hawaii but born in Kenya. He's an American, right? Because he was conceived in the States. No, he was born in Kenya, so he's Kenyan. He wasn't a person yet when he was in utero in Hawaii. He didn't have fetus citizens naturalization rights then and there, according to these shitheads. The opposite of an anchor baby. It's a human with human rights when they want it to be, and an illegal alien baby when it suits their needs. You see how that works? So, back to the past. Why didn't the poorest white people take those jobs, compete with the Irish and Chinese for them? Well, because those jobs were slavery. White people would rather be poor than be a slave. It's the same fucking thing that's happening with Mexicans today. The same stupid motherfuckers are blaming their unemployability on Mexicans. They're entitled. They're everything they accuse immigrants of being, but worse. They're inexcusable. The problem now is that there is no new world to send these degenerate, wretched refuse of our teeming shores to any longer. In 1921, Congress voted 78-1 to pass the Emergency Quota Act. Nothing changed. Poor white racists were still leeching off the welfare state, and minorities were still being exploited or marginalized. By now, due to European wars, American industry was booming, and Mexicans were working the fields while women were being introduced into the factories. World War II breaks out, and between 1944 and 1954, per the Bracero program, the United States saw a 6,000% Mexican immigration increase. The government was recruiting Mexican workers to come to the United States. Bracero is the Spanish word for manual labor. And the Bracero program guaranteed minimum wages and working conditions for migrant workers until 1964 when it was terminated. Now, America thinks it can do what France couldn't, and they make up a bunch of lies and try to provoke an attack on themselves by parading battleships up and down the Southeast Asian coastline, while training and arming South Vietnamese guerrillas when a campaign of retaliation and retribution goes on, and the USS Maddox pretends to get hit by a torpedo, thus, quote, legitimizing U.S. involvement in the civil war happening between North and South Vietnam. In actuality, the Vietnam conflict was a proxy war between the United States, the USSR, and China. Not over ideology, back then it was democracy and communism, but over who could use their military to strong-arm trade deals. We went to war over what the TPP would eventually attempt to manifest, slave labor rights, same thing as NAFTA but in Asia. In the United States, if we don't have an enemy, just wait. Look at who we're helping by training and arming today in the proxy war against Russia and China, and you'll have a good idea who we'll be at war with within a decade. And they'll be fighting us for the exact same reason they were fighting them. Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iran, Venezuela, mark my words. The U.S. will find a way to sell these wars to the American people. Iran will attack us and provoke a war, even if we have to do it ourselves. And it wouldn't be the first time we gave ourselves a black eye and blamed it on someone we completely decimated later on, like heroes do, right? Vietnam. America would never sacrifice the lives of Americans just so we could get the fruits of slave labor on the cheap, right? Vietnam, Afghanistan. Now, Malcolm Gladwell, in his podcast, Revisionist History, Season 3, Episode 6, General Chapman's Last Stand. He talks about how a Vietnam-era general was put in charge of the INS and increased the militarization of our southern border. His job in Vietnam was to put up a barrier on the Ho Chi Minh Trail between North and South. So he was qualified, right? He had experience building a stupid wall in a pointless war that we would eventually lose. Malcolm claims that previously migrants would come to North to work, but they would go home. They could pass over the border with relative ease and convenience and had no desire to leave their friends and families in Mexico. When Chapman turned our border into a demilitarized zone, the workers could no longer risk going home, so they stayed, causing the immigration rates to fall, but for the migrant to remain, ultimately longer than their visas allowed. Obviously, this would cause the immigrant population to explode. This is all contested, but Gladwell is one of the most nuanced thinkers I've come across. The man is pure genius and his work is beyond edifying. I tend to think he's right. Immigration has been more or less consistent throughout the 70s and 80s, and it was not looked upon by the majority of United States citizens as a cause for contempt. I mean, sure, Mexicans were looked down upon, but racism was just effectively education for the time. In the 80s, a popular comedy by Mexican-American comedian actor Cheech Marin plays an American born of Mexican heritage who gets swept up in an immigration raid and deported to Mexico. He struggles as a non-Spanish speaking Mexican American to come back to his own country illegally. This film was released in 1987 or 88, I can't remember. Looking back at Cheech and Chong's stoner comedy, though, man, I can't help but think how that may have confirmed or countered the reefer madness propaganda narrative the United States government used to justify the criminalization of cannabis by telling the people this new drug called marijuana was being smoked by Mexican migrant laborers and was causing them to rape white women in their altered state of consciousness. They declared a war on drugs as an excuse to incarcerate black and brown men. White men in general have always had a deep-seated fear of brown and black men fucking white women. Ironically, the brown men they were afraid would fuck white women are largely the descendants of white men who rape brown women. Now that's some interracial Oedipus shit right there. The brown bastard son kills the white father and rapes his white mother. That's some cultural, racial Freud shit right there. Internalized and projected. Racism on the individual level seemed to be declining in the 80s, but the 90s saw a resurgence in the growth of hate groups and basic pedestrian racism. Organizations like WAR, White Aryan Resistance, the National Front, and Hammerskins were making propaganda and making music and art as propaganda for the neo-Nazi movement. Really, teenage music has always been about pissing your parents off, and punk music, racist punk music specifically, was growing in underground culture. Bands like Screwdriver. Popular films addressing the race relations were no longer comedy. We got films like American History X, a story of a young conservative kid whose big brother, played by Edward Norton, was a radicalized neo-Nazi that murdered a black man in front of his house. The main theme was anti-Nazi, but the imagery did nothing but romanticize the neo-Nazi movement. I know firsthand I had to sit through that movie 1,000 times with my friends. Even then I'd hear them say, who pushed back on their ignorant and hateful views, like, not all blacks are bad. There's a difference between a black man and a nigger. When asked what the difference was, the answer would be something like, a black man knows where he belongs. Just stupid, ignorant, racist bullshit. So what do you call a white man who doesn't know where a black man belongs? Racist is too mild. Deplorable is too obvious. I dealt with racism my whole life. I lived in Utah. People didn't hate blacks here because they didn't know any. The only experience they had with blacks was on television. They thought they were inferior, but they didn't hate them. They did hate Mexicans, though. Maybe it was partly possibly due to Mormon doctrine concerning Lamanites and their belief that Native Americans were the lost tribe of one of the lost tribes of Israel and were descended from Laman, who was basically Mormon Cain in their doctrine. So Mexicans were here. Mexicans were here because this was fucking Mexico 100 years ago. The border crossed them, not the other way around. Not all Spanish-speaking Indians were Mexican. Anyway, I didn't fit the stereotype, so they met me with curiosity. My friends' parents would ask me, so, Christopher, what are you? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they'd ask me, like, well, what nationality are you? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me ask my mom. Mom would tell me, you're American. So I tell my friend's mom I was American, and she said, yeah, but where are you from? And it's like, from Kearns. Then she says, no, silly, where are your ancestors from? And my mom had given me a laundry list of where my ancestors come from. And this only really happens to brown kids in Utah, by the way. Not specifically, but it never happened to me when I was living in LA. The real question was, why did I have brown skin? What that implied to me at 7 years old was brown skin was bad. I was suspect. I was suspect based on the hue of my flesh, my pigment. Mexican was the easy answer, or so I thought. It was the most simple answer to why my skin is brown. My friends' parents had gotten to know me, as a person by then, and I challenged their bigotry about Mexican. And I shit you not, they tried to convince me that I was wrong and that I must be Italian. And I just started lying to them. I started lying to my friends' parents, telling them I'm Welsh like Catherine Zeta-Jones or I'm Italian. I still, now, to this day, get asked by new acquaintances what I am. And I realized they wanted to know which racist jokes they can tell around me. Well, if I respect you, you can say whatever the fuck you want around me. The more politically incorrect, the better. Problem is, if you're asking me what I am, then you're probably an unaware or unself-aware racist dumbfuck. And you better watch the fuck what you say about any marginalized group, around everyone, not just around me, motherfucker. Because a lot of Mexicans have white skin and look just like you. Their mothers are Mexican, but their complexions and white skin come from their fathers. You don't know who you can be racist around anymore. So, seems like a pretty good time to cut the shit and stop being stupid, huh? Who are you? What do you stand for? You willing to lose your life for the cause of social justice, civil rights? Because I am. Not entirely my choice. But it's something I would choose if my complexion were the same as my brother's, who is just as Mexican as I am and as white as Donald Trump's dumb fat fucking ass is. By the way, Mexicans don't claim me. They don't believe I've suffered racism enough or as much as they have. I don't fucking argue with them. In fact, some even resent me because I, quote, betrayed my race and sold out my culture. I'm like, no, motherfucker. I love Mexican culture. I never met a taco I didn't like. I do love Mexican culture, but my grandparents knew the struggles I would face if they didn't assimilate me into English American culture. They never taught us Spanish. They taught us how to cook, though. That's the more important thing because here's why. Spanish is a fucking European language. English, Spanish, they're both European languages. You assimilated into European culture or you died. You were murdered. You also took upon yourself the Christian cross. Just as important or more than the language. You accepted the Christian cross into your heart, or you died by it in your back, tied to it, burned alive on it, impaled by it. I know these Mexicans' history more so than they themselves do. Our mother's culture was beaten out of us and Spanish European culture into us. That's the real reason Mexicans get the word Jesus tattooed between their shoulders in Old English, or put bumper stickers of Mary Guadalupe on their fucking lowrider and shit. If the conquistadors questioned your Catholicism, it was curtains for you, and there would be pain. They were sadistic as fuck. So the survivors of the American Spanish Inquisition taught their children adherence to Catholicism like their lives depended on it, because it literally did. You know, no one told me this shit, by the way. It's just some shit I theorize on. If I'm wrong and you have another theory, let me know. It's just me seeing something and asking why and connecting dots. So now it's the 1990s and my friends are watching American History X and I'm watching the news. And I see this motherfucker on Dateline. Subcomandante Marcos. And by then I'd hear racist idiots like Adam Carolla talk about how Mexicans need to fix Mexico and not come to California and turn California into a shithole. This is Subcomandante Marcos. I saw what he was doing. And I loved it. Rage Against the Machine would eventually write some songs about the Zapatistas in their album Battle for Los Angeles. He was fixing the corruption problems with the Mexican government. He was trying to make Mexico great enough that his people could stay home with their friends and families where they wanted to be, where they belonged. In America, we were going to help the Zapatistas reform their country, right? Right. Wrong. The United States sent CIA and Black Hawk helicopters to Chiapas to dispense with Mexico's little anti-government insurgency. I watched that shit go down on American news each night, and it was all bullshit. I could see the contradictions and the lies and the racism and the hypocrisy. And my racist friends didn't give a fuck about solving immigration as a problem. I realized they needed Mexicans here so they could hate them and blame them for their failures at capitalism and use them as a buoy to keep them floating, just skimming just above the bottom tier in the social dominance hierarchy. You know, just one proud rung above the melanated slave. Why was the Mexican government even concerned with Marcos? Why were the United States concerned with him? Why? NAFTA. The Mexican government was worried that the United States wouldn't negotiate NAFTA with them if they were in an armed conflict with Marxist farmers in Chiapas. So, what is NAFTA and what does it have to do with immigration? Well, I've read a lot of boring shit on the subject, so you don't have to. In a nutshell, it's a bill designed to screw workers and allow corporations, American corporations, to screw workers and Mexican corporations to pollute without violating EPA regulations. It works like this. Fuck the American worker and fuck the Mexican environment. There you go. You're welcome. Problem is, Mexico's air pollution and water pollution doesn't fucking stay in Mexico, and neither does its labor. This evil globalism shit you hear about on Fox and InfoWars and Ground Zero, this Jewish conspiracy bullshit, is propaganda campaign to keep your nationalism on top of your identity hierarchy and not your humanity. They believe that a pyramid scheme of hucksterism, coercion, oppression, and exploitation is natural because of fucking serotonin and lobsters. So, who are they? Why are they coming here? Well, they're human beings. They're men, women, and children. They come from Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and more from further southern regions of South America. They're people who are brave, or desperate enough, or both, to risk everything for a chance at hope. para los niños, for the children. Why don't they fix their own country rather than coming to America and ruining ours then? Well, first of all, they can't fix their country while our government is involved in their affairs, colluding in corruption with their dictators that we prop up as puppets. We meddle with their elections and we overthrow their democratically elected leaders. We support government-backed coups to get rid of their democratically elected leaders and install puppet regimes that are cooperative with U.S. business interests at the expense of their people's lives and liberty. Secondly, they aren't ruining your lives. They're not ruining your country. They're providing daycare for your children, picking your fruits and vegetables, landscaping your lawn, pouring the foundation of your new home, framing or roofing your house, or loading your Amazon Prime purchases into a semi to be delivered to your front door. They're the pool boys that clean your swimming pools and sexually satisfy your malcontent wives, desperate housewives, while you're at work earning an actual living, wasting time you could be spending with your family playing golf with your boss because you have to kiss his asshole if you ever want to elevate your career status higher than middle management in a never-ending, ascending ladder of buttholes, eagerly awaiting your enthusiastic or greedy little puckered lips. That's who they are. They're workers. And that's who some of you bourgeois motherfuckers are. Never met a boot or a butthole you wouldn't lick for a buck. Okay? So, this is the situation put as concisely as I can present it. Since the 1980s, because of the drug war, South and Central America have been migrating here to seek asylum from their government-backed death squads, drug cartels, or the abject poverty these types of circumstances, dealings, provide, and not only that, but ensure. U.S. sanctions kill people who can't receive or afford their medication. If you really want to know what's happening, or what happened in South America in the 80s that's causing what's happening now, watch Jeremy Scales' Dirty Wars documentary. It goes into detail as to why they're all coming here. And the same shit's happening. Same people, actually. Elliot Abrams, fucking John Bolton. These motherfuckers have been pulling for this shit since the Iran-Contra hostage fucking scandal. Fucking in like 1984. It's been a long time coming. So what's happening now is the effect of that. Other similar things are happening in Venezuela and Colombia right now in America. Wealth disparity has grown from around a 1 to 9 or 12 ratio for median worker to CEO pay to a 1 in 300 rate. You can't judge an economy by how well the wealthiest among us are doing. You can't say America is the wealthiest country in the world when we're in unbelievable debt. We always talk about the deficit, how Democrats want to raise the debt ceiling, how Republicans want to cut taxes. It's really fucking stupid if you understand it. Why? Because it's bullshit. It's a con job. They're both lying to the people, and the Republicans are getting conservative-oriented people to blame brown people because they're naive, and convincing them that the Democrats only want them here so they can vote for the party that doesn't want to watch them die in the desert. It's like, no, you're being manipulated. I'm aware of the, quote, facts you have that the libtards don't. I'm not informed by the Jewish left liberal media like you think exclusively. I know what they're telling conservative people, and it's bullshit. There is no left-wing bias in the media. They're lying to you. It doesn't exist. What am I talking about? Rachel Maddow? I'm talking about the fact that even left-wing outlets, pundits, media, is capital-driven and motivated. It's capitalism in its core. The left are being propagandized too. They just have different advertisers in the commercial breaks, tailor-made specifically to their program prejudices. Fucking Birkenstocks and fucking tofu comes on between Rachel Maddow's talking head. But it's still fucking capitalism. It's still right-wing propaganda with a left liberal. It's not leftist. Really, honestly, if you want left liberal truth in reporting, you need to be watching Jeremy Scale, The Intercept and Democracy Now, because they're public supported. They're not propagandists. Okay? Those are the only media sources that I can recommend with a good conscience. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything is influencing and affecting everything else. The key common element is that power dictates what happens. It's easier to predict the future when you have a hand in creating it. Money is power, right? Cream, cash rules everything around me, Wu-Tang type shit. That's indicative of our values. Our values are garbage, even according to any standard, okay? It's fucking eat, fuck, die, throw away, fucking consume, shit, destroy, garbage in, garbage out. The ruling class doesn't give a fuck about your human life. They aren't interested in leaving a better planet for your children. The plan is to leave this planet for them and their children. They're planning to leave the planet. I know, it sounds hard to believe, it sounds far-fetched, but it's true. If you want this planet to support humanity, you have to embrace humanity and prioritize the planet and your humanity over and above all other identities. That's fucking identity politics. That's the identity politics that needs to be contended with. What's happening on our border is a barometer for the ruling class to determine how much bullshit we are willing to tolerate before we redistribute their power back to the people. Stop worshiping money. Stop worshiping celebrities. Start relating with people on a human level. That's our prime directive, first and foremost. What's happening right now is unacceptable. Don't you think it's kind of fucking ironic that America wants to call itself a Christian nation and then model its government after the very same Roman government that murdered their God? It's like, fucking stupid are we? Who do we blame for murdering our God and thereby saving us through his grace and sacrifice for our sins? The Jews. Do you see how fucking stupid that is? We blame the Jews for fulfilling Christian prophecy. We love the Romans. And why? Okay, listen. If you're gonna say some shit like Stalin proved that Marxism is a failed system, then you have to turn that rationale, that logic, right back around and say that the fall of the Roman Empire is proof positive that republics are failed systems. No? Why? Peterson, you fuck. Okay? It's the same rationale. It's the same logic. You know, you can't just have it both ways. Here's a question. Who is hurt by migrant labor? Who benefits? Who has the power to cause it? That's where your righteous indignation should be directed unless you like being a slave, unless your comfort is worth more than the struggles of your brother. You have power and you have a voice when it's amplified through the power of the people. 300 million megaphones in this country. Our strength is in our diversity and in our numbers. We're one people in one nation under God, motherfucker. One world. That's new. So let me ask you, like order? A little chaos on the side or no? Alright, I'll stop fucking shitting on Peterson and start genuflecting to Bill Hicks. We're one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is just a dream and we're the imagination of ourselves. Here's Alex with some chemtrails that turn frogs gay updates. We don't have to be the fucking Romans with more lethal military toys and less amusing gladiator games, you know? We could evolve beyond our distractions and pastimes, you know? We could grow the fuck up. You know, one of my favorite biblical contradictions is when the Bible tells us that when we are children, we speak and act as children. But when we mature, we put away childish things. Let me pull it up. 1 Corinthians 13:11, King James Version. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Matthew 18:3, New International Version, NIV. And he said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. You have to know the rules to break them. It's the same with music. It's the same with everything. Every rule has an exception, including this rule. Okay? Look, if you're not a Christian, you're probably a good person, and I'm not preaching to you. I'm preaching to the cognitive, lazy, and generally unempathetic version of Christian patriot that's probably never going to watch this because they already think they know everything. Because they've been watching fucking Joel Osteen, and he's saving their souls, so now they're free to be bigoted little asshole motherfuckers with God's grace and in God's service. Fucking Westboro Baptist shitheads that think they speak for God. You know, I don't speak for God. I'm telling you what the fucking Bible says. It tells you to do one thing and then the exact opposite the next. It's complex. I understand why people want to just throw it in the garbage, but that's a mistake because it can provide an insight into the mind of your enemy. The enemy being the ignorant mind, foreign or domestic, yours or your brother's. That's your enemy. Ignorance is your enemy. Nobody here is born enlightened, okay? We all were humbled by something that primed us to learn and develop. And sometimes that's shame, but more often, it's kindness and sympathy and understanding. It's patience. Patience is a virtue. That's an invaluable tool, dude. But we don't have time to wait. We don't have the luxury of time to be patient with these ignorant motherfuckers. We have to do something now, or that shit we said that we were never gonna let happen again. Well, it's gonna fucking happen again. You know? How about we just say never again, just one last time, and then we'll never say never again, ever again. So what's happening at the border? You want facts and data, or do you want the reality of it? People are doing the most depraved, unimaginable things to one another down there right now. That's what's happening. Rape and murder, child slavery, trafficking, all of it. If you can imagine it in your most depraved shadow mind, it's happening down there. Who's raping and murdering who? Well, that depends on what side of the border they're caught on. You see, these people are desperate enough to risk everything to leave what they know, and they have no real human rights anywhere. Not at home and not here anymore. That's why they're seeking asylum here, which is 100% legal for them to do, by the way. What isn't legal is lobbing tear gas at them and putting their kids in cages and separating them from their families and starving them and forcing them to live in just vile, unsanitary, and cruel conditions. And that's what's happening down there right now. The crisis, the real crisis, is the volume. And the volume could be solved by diplomatic means if our government would make different deals with their governments. If we would actually go down there and help the people, we wouldn't have the problems that we have. Now, I listened to a Border Patrol agent on Thaddeus Russell's podcast, Unregistered. The dude's name was like Joshua Childress, I think. Yeah, he fucking resigned. He resigned from the Border Patrol. And his reasons for doing so are reasonable. It's worth listening to. I listened to it over a year or so ago, and I've forgotten most of what it was about, but one of the things Childress said is that his job was to basically make sure migrants were not dying of exposure in the desert. And this is during Obama, okay? This wasn't fucking Trump. His job was to ensure migrants were not dying and that they were processed properly. The bureaucrats, even back then, were making it difficult to do his job. And he didn't feel like he was doing himself or his country any favors by what he was being ordered to do. So we have conscientious objectors who refuse to do the work of Border Patrol because it's morally questionable. It's unethical. It's only getting worse. And that's obvious. That's obvious by what the shit ProPublica reported last week when the congresswomen went down there and looked at what was going on in their best behavior. That shit was appalling by any standard. So I read an article in The Independent that was released on June 12th in 2019, detailing how the case of a 36-year-old Scott Warren of Arizona was caught, basically doing what Childress described as his fucking job, making sure migrants weren't dying in the desert and recovering their bodies when they did. In 2018, Border Patrol stopped focusing as much on looking for migrants and focused more on looking for people who might be helping them, to prosecute them, to criminalize them. Setting out water and food for them is a crime. I'm sure you've seen the videos of our courageous Border Patrol kicking over jugs of water and pouring water bottles into the dirt. Then they set up surveillance cameras in those locations where the people were leaving water bottles for them and began arresting them. People who are helping people to not die of exposure in the desert are being prosecuted and criminalized. Warren faces, and I shit you fucking not, Warren faces 20 years in prison if he's convicted by the jury. But they can't decide if what he did was humanitarian or criminally motivated. That's a tough call, huh, America, where no good deed goes unpunished? Unbelievable. Seriously, say I have nothing but hatred and contempt in my heart for America or its government. I'm sitting in my evil communist genius laboratory imagining of all the ways I can destroy Western civilization. And a light bulb pops up over my head. I've got it. I'll leave water bottles and cans of beans in the desert so Mexicans won't die. And soon, very soon, America will be infested with the fed and hydrated workers who are willing to live up to the values placed on their labor by free markets. Fuck out of here. You kidding me? This is how fucking stupid half Americans are. They know goddamn well nobody criminally helps people. It's fucking cartoonish how stupid and evil our government makes Spaceballs look competent. Our government is worse in actuality than Robin Hood's villain, the sheriff of fucking Nottingham. 20 years for helping a Mexican to survive the desert. 20 years. Brock Turner rapes an unconscious woman behind a dumpster, and he gets 90 days in jail. And sympathy from the judge, because the poor kid, his whole life's ahead of him. He can swim fast. They put his fucking track records, whatever the fuck you call it, when you can swim back and forth across the pool a bunch of times really fast. They put his times. They put his times in the report and considered that in his fucking sentencing him. Like, fuck. Clown world, motherfucker? You want to talk about clown world? Look no further than our criminal justice system and the disparity between how it treats fucking black people and white people and rich people and poor people, motherfucker. That's fucking clown world. Honk honk, motherfucker. It's a fucking joke, man. It really is. Honk honk. It's like the new Sieg Heil. The American Sieg Heil, honk honk. Look it up. Don't. It's fucking ridiculous. It's embarrassing. These fucking people are embarrassing to our country. And the right love it. They eat it up. There is nothing that makes them happier than to see brown people suffer. That's the fucking point. It's some really sick fucking racist schadenfreude that they enjoy. They fucking masturbate to that shit. They fucking do, dude. They're sick. They're sick fucks. And it's all semantics. Obama wasn't overtly racist. It wasn't personal to him. It was policy. He took no joy in it. That's the subtle difference. But it is a respect of human dignity or not in Trump's case. We all know how he speaks on racial issues. If you can't see that, nothing I say is going to change your mind. You know, I see the smirks and the denials and the just the blowing off of the entirety of it all. Oh, you're just making things up. You're sensitive. You're just being sensitive. You're just over-exaggerating. We're not fascists. Those aren't concentration camps. It's like, yeah, actually, get a fucking dictionary, motherfucker. We are fascists, and those are concentration camps. And it's not just the last 2 years. That's what I'm trying to tell these fucking liberal motherfucking conservatives, dude. Trump didn't start this shit. We didn't turn fascist overnight. It's been a long fucking process. You know when it started? When it really, really started? And we were leaning there in the 90s. But September 11th, 2001 is the day that I knew we were fucked. I knew, to me, dude, that was the fucking Reichstag. That was, and it's, dude, we got time. These fucking players, these move makers, they got nothing but time. They're very, very patient. We're running out of time. And we're fucking desperate now. We don't have the fucking luxury of time on our side anymore. And I don't know if anything we do is gonna bring us back from this dark, dystopian fucking nightmare. I don't know. One of the only things that gives me any kind of hope or confidence is when I go on these right-winger fucking websites and they're scared. It's like everybody's scared. You know? So be brave, dear one. Be brave or be undone. It is all semantics. It's not a concentration camp, okay? What is it? Dude, this semantic shit that's going on reminds me of George Carlin. His bit about euphemisms, how we soften or harden our language depending on whether we want to elicit positive or negative responses or associations. You know, he demonstrated how what used to be termed shell shock became battle fatigue, became operational exhaustion, became post-traumatic stress disorder, and eventually PTSD. And then even that definition had very strong, strict, guiding, definitive language in it. And now it's like anybody can just fucking self-diagnose themselves with PTSD. You saw your parents fuck or you fell down the stairs and now you qualified to get fucking medicated for PTSD. The coddling, dude, yeah, yesterday I'm driving home from Flaming Gorge with Brooke and listening to Jonathan Haidt's newest book. I don't know if I like that motherfucker or not, but the shit he talks about rings true. Dude, it's fucking ridiculous. The coddling that goes on with us. Anyway, Sigmund Freud, his nephew, Edward Bernays, is the dude who figured out what neuro-linguistic programming is. And it's a way for someone to manipulate language in order to elicit or provoke specific behaviors in a subject. It's fucking mind control, dude. Association with colors and frequencies can make you impulsive, appeal to your reptilian brain, make you horny or hungry, or make you want to buy a Whopper or a fucking car, manipulate your primal response to stimulate, to get you to buy things you don't want, or join the fucking army, or accept atrocities as security measures. If television was good at NLP, social media is God. It's unbelievable how pervasive neurolinguistic programming and advertising in social media is. It's disturbing to no end to me. It literally keeps me awake at night, knowing that people are being brain fucked by their own fucking devices, and they're completely unaware of it. And then I wonder why I can't get through to them. Here's George Carlin.
Only words. You can't be afraid of words that speak the truth, even if it's an unpleasant truth, like the fact that there's a bigot and a racist in every living room on every street corner in this country. I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms or euphemistic language. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent the kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. And it gets worse with every generation. For some reason, it just keeps getting worse. I'll give you an example of that. There's a condition in combat, most people know about it. It's when a fighting person's nervous system has been stressed to its absolute peak and maximum, can't take any more input. The nervous system has either snapped or is about to snap. In the First World War, that condition was called shell shock. Simple, honest, direct language. 2 syllables. Shell shock. Almost sounds like the guns themselves. That was 70 years ago. Then a whole generation went by, and the Second World War came along, and the very same combat condition was called battle fatigue. 4 syllables now. Takes a little longer to say. Doesn't seem to hurt as much. Fatigue is a nicer word than shock. Shell shock. Battle fatigue. Then we had the war in Korea, 1950. Madison Avenue was riding high by that time, and the very same combat condition was called operational exhaustion. Hey, we're up to 8 syllables now. And the humanity has been squeezed completely out of the phrase. It's totally sterile now. Operational exhaustion. Sounds like something that might happen to your car. Then, of course, came the war in Vietnam, which has only been over for about 16 or 17 years. And thanks to the lies and deceit surrounding that war, I guess it's no surprise that the very same condition was called post-traumatic stress disorder. Still 8 syllables, but we've added a hyphen. And the pain is completely buried under jargon. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll bet you if we'd have still been calling it shell shock, some of those Vietnam veterans might have gotten the attention they needed at the time.
His point is laser sharp. What we might as well be calling migrant living quarters, we call detention facilities, which are concentration camps. And if we call them what they are, we're more inclined to do something about them to fix the situation. That's why the reactionary right are so excitable, so indignant about the terminology, the semantics and linguistics that we use. A genocide by any other name reeks just as putrid. And history will look back on this era with shame, not unfamiliar to the descendants of the Third Reich. But okay, there's a difference. That because everything we say and think and do and feel and know on Facebook, on social media, you're not going to be able to just deny. Your grandchildren aren't going to be able to deny that you were a fucking dick, fascist, fucking racist, motherfucking stupid, asshole, fucking piece of shit. They're not. Like, if your fucking grandfather was a Nazi, nobody needs to know that shit. But now it's all fucking changed. Your children are going to know exactly who the fuck you are and where you stood on this shit. Your grandchildren. And the browner we become, the more and more fucked up that's gonna be for them. You know? Dude, they're all gonna be me. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. I don't know, you tell me. It's a prison, reserved for men and women and children, separated, whose only crime is not wanting to die or live in unlivable conditions. Unbearable terror. It's a prison for fucking children who are caged and deprived of sleep and nutrition in prison conditions. Do I have to tell you children do not belong in prisons? It's detrimental to their well-being. It affects their neurosynaptic gaps and makes them predictably criminal. You put a kid in a cage, and you can all but guarantee that kid will be dead or in an adult prison by the time he's 21. It's abuse. It's government-sanctioned child abuse. It's innately abusive, and we know this. Look, I'm just a dumb fuck with no credibility, no credentialing. I went to public school and dropped out of college. I took it upon myself to educate myself, and I'm not a genius by any stretch, so if I know this shit, I assume the intelligentsia in academia know about human behavioral psychology to even a greater extent than I do. Those in charge of running our society are surely more competent and capable than I am. Have they never heard of the Stanford prison experiment and the findings? Have you? If not, here's a basic view of what it was and what it reveals. Philip Zimbardo, psychology professor at Stanford University in the summer of 1971, did an experiment. He wrote a book that I can't recommend enough called The Lucifer Effect. I found elements of it fucking chilling and disturbing to my core. In the experiment, Zimbardo put out ads for college students to volunteer for a 2-week experiment where they would simulate a prison environment. and I'm going off memory, so some of the details might be off a bit, but I'm referencing it to point out something obvious that you can relate to. If you've ever had an experience with a hall monitor in school, or an asshole cop that just wanted to flex his authority, like fucking respect my authority, fucking Eric Cartman, motherfucker. So like 10 or 12 kids are selected by elimination process of temperament. The interviewees were all selected on the basis of even keel temperaments, say, on a more or less uniform spectrum. They selected for what, for all intents and purposes, would be your average male college student. In the 70s, this is 1971. So they divide them evenly into guards and prisoners. The guards go home. 4 guards guard 12 prisoners in 3 8-hour shifts. The prisoners were forced to wear medical-style gowns with pantyhose on their heads, and the guards wore typical prison guard attire complete with reflective lens sunglasses. And if I remember correctly, the abuse begins on the first shift of the experiment, and by 2 days, people began demanding to be released and threatening lawsuits against Zimbardo if they're not. The entire experiment was terminated before it even really gotten started. The prisoners were psychologically and even sexually tortured and traumatized by these guards. It goes there quick. It gets dark fast. The human mind, the unexamined shadow. That shit gets dark fucking quick. And for whatever the fuck reason, in human males, it always gets sexual. It always goes that route. Sexually fucking humiliate people. I don't know if it's because of the Bible or not. I don't know if it's a Western culture thing or not. I imagine it's not. I imagine Eastern prison situations, environments, circumstances are probably similar. I think it's probably more of a male thing than a Western thing. But it's definitely something that we need to fucking look at as a society, as a culture, if we want to call ourselves civilized. So, and by the way, that's the reason prison time has a ridiculous track record for reducing recidivism. Fucking obviously, it's not a correctional facility. They aren't rehabilitating anyone. They're dehumanizing them. They're reinforcing the chemical reactions that cause the pathology in the first place. You know, I'm a college dropout and I see the causes and effects here. It's not just obvious to me. Others with more letters before their names have similar conclusions. They know it. They don't rectify it. What the fuck does that tell you? It tells me they know goddamn well what the industrial prison complex is doing and how it's operating. That tells me the system isn't fucking broken. That tells me that this shit is intentional and is in a cultural and a societal context a declaration of war on certain people of a certain class. A class war disguised as a drug war. That's actually a race war disguised as a culture war. They're all fronts for the same war. This immigration shit, it's not new. It's status quo shit. It vacillates in extremities and expression. But it's the same. We should all know behavioral psychology. This shit should be fucking taught in general education. We should all know what the fuck is actually happening. But they, who's they? The ruling class, the fucking Illuminati or whatever the fuck, our overlords, the ones that have the power to change and fix shit, to control the information we have. They don't want to change shit because according to them, it's working exactly according to their plan. It's easy to predict the future when you had a hand in creating it. You're being shown this shit to manipulate you. It affects you on an emotional level. They show you the dead body of a dad and his daughter drowned. They're working both sides of this. You know, we allow them to do it because we're afraid of them. We're afraid of them. Why are we afraid of them? Because Glenn Beck fucking told you to be. Why? Why does Fox want to terrify the public? Because the public is transfixed by threat. Human beings respond viscerally to perceived threat, and it makes us compliant because we don't know what the fuck to do. You know, we need a leader, we need a shepherd. So here he comes, the champion, delivered to us by the same power class that told us we were being threatened. It's the whole it's the fucking window maker who goes around breaking people's windows because it's good for business. It's the Hegelian dialectic shit. We fall for it. We always fall for it. Not even just here. Dude, our economy exists by conspiracy of manufacturers against you and me, the consumer, the light bulb conspiracy. Watch that on YouTube, well, if you still can. It tells how corporations that manufacture everything from your light bulbs to your iPhone to your car to your house are conspiring to build their products in competition with each other to expire or become obsolete within a limited amount of time, usually around 5 to 10 years. Sometimes regarding tech, it's even sooner. That's probably for different reasons. If they build something to last, then it doesn't get replaced, and they only sell one of them, and then our economy goes to shit. Capitalism. It's a failure of capitalism that nobody even really knows about or sees. The money and the regulation can't keep up with the exponential innovation, though, in tech, and that's what's up. Climate change. You think you have an immigration problem now, wait until the shorelines start moving in. The majority of people on this planet live on a fucking coast. It's prime time real estate, right? Did you hear that dumb fuck Ben Shapiro's solution on the issue? Proves how stupid this motherfucker is. Play Ben Shapiro.
All of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet by the next 100 years, and it puts all the low-lying areas on the coast underwater, right? Which, let's say all of that happens. You think the people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Just one small problem. Sell their houses to who, Ben?
The solution to the immigration isn't as complicated as we make it seem. Let the corporations have free market on labor. That's what Republicans would be saying if they weren't so misinformed. Open borders, why not? Unless you close borders for money and trade as well, that's the problem. Money's free to cross borders, but labor isn't. So what does that do to the value of labor? That's the key to the problem. Balance that. Completely open or completely closed, either works for the worker. The immigration shit is really about workers' rights. Migrant workers have the amount of rights the Republicans want you to have, which is none. Okay? If you don't want Mexicans here, you need to figure out how to make corporations get the work they need done that you won't do for what they do it for. They get this shit all the time. It's illegal. Part of illegal, don't you understand? Well, Matlock, let's look at the legality of immigration and what laws are being violated and who's violating them. Welcome to the civics section of this video. Crossing the border is a misdemeanor punishable by a $50 to a $250 fine that doubles for repeat offenses. It's actually a less severe, quote, crime than literally littering. Who's the victim? No victim? The white American minimum wage worker? Is he the victim? What's the penalty for exploiting undocumented labor? Penalties for exploiting undocumented labor is a $375 to $1,600 fine and 6 months in jail for a first offense. How many businesses have been prosecuted in the last year? According to Google, 11. How many children have been lost by ICE? Same source, close to 2,000 confirmed, but the actual number isn't known. How many kids have died in these concentration camps? Why are they dying? Why? How does a government agency lose 1,479 children, or whatever the fuck the number is now? I bet they could find them if they owed taxes. They fucking sold them. The government is tracking children just like the guns and drugs that Obama did during fucking Fast and Furious, and just like they've always done. The CIA has always human trafficked, gun trafficked, drug trafficked. If there is a black market, our government runs it. It's not a fucking secret. It's just that Americans are in denial. You don't believe they would do something like that. Why? Because they're moral? Fucking naive. They know where those kids are, and they know how to reunite the ones they have with their families. They know what they know because that's within their control. What they don't know, the reality is that the DHS has no clue how many unauthorized people are in the United States. That's part of the, quote, agenda of the census. Republicans want to put immigration on the census for obvious reasons. Unauthorized people will simply not fill out the census. They'll disappear. Then they won't have to be politically represented in districts. Gerrymandering becomes easy. They'll be able to fudge more district data to move the boundaries around to exclude more Democratic voters will also make it easy to manipulate data of the general population. So, to conclude, what's the most important thing to take away from this issue? It's that imperialism cannot exist without slaves, and if you object to them being imported, then you better be willing to take their place. And if you're a decent human being with a heart and mind, then it's that the humanitarian dereliction must be ended post-haste, and our democracy be restored so that we can rectify the problems we face that our government has a bloody hand in creating. Because if the left don't demand the right to do what's right, there will be nothing left. Thank you for supporting my channel. I really do appreciate it. I got my first report card from YouTube, and I'm doing better than I thought I would, honestly. I really do appreciate my subscribers, everybody that's liked and shared, everybody that's, passed my channel around. Like I said, in a year or so, I'm gonna go fucking full-on pro with this shit. I'm still learning how to figure out how to move my memory and storage around so that I can even make these videos. It is costing money, and it's taken way more fucking time than I thought it would be. I don't know if you noticed, the environment's different in here today. I didn't get run out into the back or my studio. Dude, it's summer, it's hot as hell in that studio, or it's loud. You either got the air blowing, or it's just a smelter fucking pit. So, anyway, I love doing these shows for you. I'm really grateful when you guys do watch them, and appreciate your comments. Any kind of engagement that you do with these videos helps me. And so when you do that, I appreciate it. So thanks a lot, man. And well, that's I guess I'll see you in a week. Peace.